Hey guys, haven't shot a video in a while. Just figured I'd shoot something to kind of just fill my time with some car stuff while I'm waiting for some more parts for this one to show up. And what I wanted to talk about today is over the years I've helped a lot of people work on their cars and I've worked on mine a lot, and just different things that I've found that are good to have on hand for any kind of project you might want to do that might pop up. And just instead of getting to a point and then getting stuck where you need something stupid and have to stop and run out, just something that I kind of stuff that I keep on hand to help just make the process go by easier. So I'm just going to start on this side of the table. I obviously have a lot more stuff than just this. This is just a sampling of what I have. I'm kind of a guy that likes to be over prepared, but bunch of different size wire. This is not your, run to Lowe's or Home Depot and buy wire. This is actual decent, individual copper strand wire. It's not aluminum cord wire, which is getting to be more and more common nowadays. I buy a lot of this stuff on places like Newegg and things like that. This way I know I'm getting something decent because you can see where it's made and you can see the strand count and things like that. Some other electrical stuff that I keep on hand. I have a bunch of different size resistors, especially if back in the day when you were doing LED conversions and you had to make everything yourself before they came out with the fully enclosed units. Different fuses, different fuse holders and fuse styles, some LED strips, just some spare interior light bulbs. These happen to be MR2 specific. These are the TAC adapter, or I'm sorry, the TAC capacitors that tend to go bad. Keeping with the electrical stuff, different size connectors, different style fuses, tail light bulbs. I have fuses and different style of wire and butt connectors, and a lot of this kind of stuff is your Harbor Freight special. For the most part, it's fine. It's going to do the job it needs to do. You don't need to spend a ton of money on it. I mean, a fuse is a fuse and a wire connector is a wire connector. They're all made in China. It doesn't matter where you get them from, so why spend more for it? Heat shrink, probably the number one thing that people avoid when working on electrical projects in cars. And if you want to do a really nice clean install, makes a huge difference. And this way you also know that it's insulated properly and you're not using your electric tape and ending up with it looking like a raggedy mess when you're done. After that, a good soldering iron. This one happens to be a Snap-on butane powered one. I think there's one company that makes them for everybody and then just puts different stickers on them, because I've seen the same exact one for probably a third of the price of what Snap-on charges. But really handy, especially if you're doing stuff under the dash. You're not trying to pull electric cords or anything like that. Works really fast. I like those. Some leads, voltmeter. This one's a Fluke. This is a tool that I would say definitely spend a couple bucks on. Don't get Harbor Freight junk, because it's not going to show consistency from use to use. I've tried using like the little crappy $9 ones that they have, and they're not there. I mean, I picked this one up used at a garage sale for 50 bucks. Probably best tool I ever bought. Use it all the time, and it's helped me find so many problems that once I find the problem with something in the electrical system, whether it's ohming or just voltage drop or short or whatever, I'll try and use just like a Harbor Freight or even like an inexpensive Home Depot model. And a lot of times they're not even sensitive enough to really pinpoint what's going on. So another really great tool for the electrical system diagnosis and repair. Some other things, vacuum tees. I have a bunch of them. Unfortunately, no matter where you get these, they seem to be made out of PVC and they just don't hold up very well. I mean, I've been looking for a good alternative to these, and short of going with full brass ones, they're hard to find decent vacuum connectors that hold up, especially in a hot engine bay where there's turbos involved. Um, but they get the job done, and everywhere sells these. Home Depot, Lowe's, AutoZone, Advanced, you name it. They all sell the same kit. It'll just have a different name on it. And as you can tell, I've had to buy numerous kits because it's always one size that you need that manages to break constantly. Going along with that, vacuum caps. These you have to go onto eBay and get. I mean, these are pure silicone vacuum caps, so they're not going to be heat sensitive. They're not going to crack with age. They're not going to, you know, stretch, dry rot, and fall apart like the rubber ones that you grab at Home Depot and AutoZone do. I used to constantly have problems on my Mitsubishi 3000 GT where the vacuum caps would dry rot and I'd end up with vacuum leaks so fast. It was almost to the point where every month I'd have to change a couple of them because of how bad they were. And finally I got tired of it and started searching, and I tried to buy them local, and nobody sold silicone vacuum caps, and to this day it blows my mind that nobody local carries them. So I went onto eBay and I just found the cheapest possible seller, and I got, the normal sizes that I needed and ordered them. These ones were the China Special, and they actually showed up with a brand name label on it, so it just tells me that the brand name label. These ones were, I think I paid like $4 for each package of these, and I think from this company they were like $12 a package. So just by buying the Chinese Special, I managed to basically get all of these for the price of one package from the name brand company. So definitely just grab some of those, especially if you're doing any kind of vacuum deletes or anything like that, or even just trying to diagnose where a problem is. Sometimes pulling a hose off and just capping it and seeing, if maybe it's a component that's added, deleted, or whatever is causing the problem. I've seen so many people that'll just like RTV in a bolt and put a hose clamp on it instead of just vacuum capping it because they don't have a vacuum cap handy. Some other stuff that I've gotten that I found has been really good to have, especially when you get into older cars. This is the eBay Special. It's like 18 bucks. It's supposed to be every fastener in an MR2. And what I found is this is actually no fasteners in an MR2, but I've used a bunch of them. This is actually the third kit that I bought. Just working on different stuff, or even though it's not the exact style that the MR2 has, they're good enough for putting people's cars back together, especially if you've taken out the interior and all your interior clips end up like this, which is pretty much what the norm is on any car. You can buy a brand new car and all the clips look like this because half the time when people put them back in, they just smash them in. So after I found that those didn't fit, I went online and I ordered a bunch of these, which are supposed to be the Toyota specific fasteners, and they sell them in a bunch of different sizes, so I had to order some of each to try and figure it out, and I'm still using them to figure out which ones go where. And then I'm pretty lucky. I have a local hardware and fastener manufacturer that actually produces a lot of this kind of stuff. So I went and actually got the Toyota OEM spec fasteners from them. So it's pretty nice because I can just compare these to the ones that I buy to see if they're the right ones. Then moving along, some other stuff. Hose clamps. I'm not a big fan of these cheapy style hose clamps. They strip out real quick. A lot of times they're aluminum, and they just don't hold up well. You'll start tightening them and then you can see it starts to stretch, or the clamp will turn sideways. But in a pinch, good to have. If you're testing something and you just need to throw a hose on there or something like that, good way to get that done. Other stuff that I kind of have, I have a whole box right there of T-bolt clamps and spare V-band clamps and stainless steel worm gear clamps. You know, trying to. I don't see it off the top of my head, but I have a bunch of boxes of different size stainless steel hose clamps that I keep on hand for doing like radiator hoses and stuff like that. Um, Not real big on Japanese stuff, but I have had to use some of these in the past for like transmission linkages on different cars. Some of them use clips on them versus cotter pins. This is huge must, and I've dropped this box about 50 times, so they're all mixed up. But this is probably the number one thing that I have issues with working on people's cars, especially like axle, castle nuts, things like that. People try and reuse the same pins over and over and over, and they get so work hardened that you end up just either having to cut them out, or they're so bent up you can't get them back through the hole. So I think these kits, like $5 at Harbor Freight, probably one of the biggest time savers, because now it's like I don't even try and take them out. I just cut them off and good to go. Some other stuff that I grabbed from Harbor Freight just to have: grease fittings. Japanese stuff, not too many things use them. In American cars, a lot of stuff uses them, especially all the suspension stuff. Probably on an American car, especially living in the Northeast, every one of them is going to be seized closed, so it's easier just to replace them versus trying to pump grease through them. Obviously, some oil filters. I always, whenever I do an oil change, I usually replace my plugs. These are for the MR2. Cheap maintenance. Obviously, I'm not going to pull out my full tap and die set, but I always keep on hand different size helicoils, spark plug repair kit, O2 sensor, thread chaser, and I have 2 or 3 different full tap and die sets. I do not recommend getting a cheap tap and die set. One, it's probably not going to have half the sizes you need, because for Japanese cars, one of the most common bolts that you have an issue with is an M10 by 125, which is a fine thread. Most generic cheapy kits aren't going to include that size because it's a fine thread, and they're going to give you the 10 millimeter by 1.5 or 1.75. So you really need to pay attention when you're using a 10 mil tap, especially for that reason with Japanese cars. Moving along, I have a bunch of different brass fittings, plugs, things like that. If you're doing gauge installs or whatever, and sometimes you just need to stand the gauge off a little bit. Sometimes you got to cob it up with parts. So I went to Home Depot and bought a bunch of different parts for, gas pipe fittings and things like that. And on the MR2 specifically, it's not too good because they're British standard pipe thread, so you can't really find those fittings in America easy. You have to buy them online. And then to go along with that, I didn't bother pulling it out, but I also usually keep 25 or 50 feet, depending on size, of stainless steel braided line. I have a bunch of different size AN fittings, plugs, bulkhead fittings, everything else. I have a whole drawer in my toolbox. It's just all that stuff that every time Summit has something on sale, and or I need to buy a part, I'll just throw a couple fittings in there, so I have them. And this way, if I'm trying to convert something or to AN fittings, I don't have to stop and try and figure out what I need and then order it and wait 3 days. It's an expensive proposition to stock a lot of AN stuff, but I do enough stuff on my cars that it's worthwhile for me to have. This right here, this is just a box that I keep handy. This is pretty much every bolt that's come off my MR2. This specifically is for my right-hand drive one, so you're seeing some white painted stuff in there. But this way, anything I need to do that, I'm putting it back to factory, or, I want to uninstall something and I drop a bolt, lose a bolt, a bolt's rusty, the threads are mangled, I can at least go back to a stock fastener. Now, for the same reason of these, with having the fastener manufacturer in my town, I have boxes and boxes of brand new, freshly manufactured stainless steel bolts that I get dirt cheap, and I have no issue with just putting something stainless steel or grade 8 or zinc coated or something like that in. And this box is just that. This is just a bunch of random screws, shooter screws, bolts, washers, and other little stuff that is handy to have. So it's like if I'm doing a project and just trying to wrap it up and I need a random bolt, I can just grab that box and dig through real quick and find what I need. I always keep on hand probably 5 tubes of Permatex red black. I have a bunch of Toyota Seal. Teflon tape, I have like 4 or 5 different grades. The mechanics helper, and then I have a bunch of dress up stuff that, if I'm doing an engine swap for someone, just to make the engine bay look kind of nice when I'm done with it and kind of give it that little finished pop. I use a lot of that stuff. Those are all off of eBay. Normally these are like 10-12 bucks for a kit with 20 bolts. I searched around and found a Chinese manufacturer where you could buy 10 of these kits and they were $1 a piece. It was kind of sketchy because obviously you're buying stuff from China, but they showed up in 3 days and they work great. I'm not going to go into a bunch of different tools for this video just because the tool aspect of this is totally different, but that's pretty much what I keep on hand. I mean, I obviously have a lot of different chemicals, brake clean, different greases, different, fluids, things like that. But for the most part, this is all the small stuff that I like to keep on hand just for in case I'm going to work on something and I don't want to have to stop mid-project because I have to run out and get something stupid. Because usually as soon as that happens, my motivation is zero and the project gets put on hold. All right, guys, keep driving.